Hare Krishna. So we're back again. Sorry about that. This is the third internet connection we're trying. Hopefully this will work okay for us. So we've been speaking about this 52nd session in this meeting in KURUKSHETRA. We're speaking of Bhramara-gita and how this connects with the Sannyasa Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and how this Bhramara-gita, Radharani's mad talks of the bumblebee at the place known as Ujjlamani, connects with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we were speaking, before our connection went off, from a verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Danyasyayam nava prema yasyano milate chaitasi antavanibir yash apyasya mudra sustu sudurgama, that the activities and symptoms of an exalted personality who has this Krishna prema, even the most learned scholar, whom Kaviraj Goswami defines as antavani bi. Anta means someone very internal, whose vani, his knowledge, is antavani bi. He's a learned person internally. But even that person, sustu means very, very much. Sustu sudurgama. Durgama means difficult. Sudurgama means very difficult. Sustu sudurgama means very, very difficult. It's not possible for someone in this material world to understand Krishna prema. And so as we were beginning to speak, someone may question, and what are we speaking on this topic for? We have an obligation. We have an obligation to those persons that we've heard from who have this love of God. We have an obligation to Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. We have an obligation to our entire parampara to always speak about this Krishna prema and to try to understand it to the best of our ability. As Kaviraj Goswami says about this symptoms of Srimati Radharani's ecstasy, he says, Olokika Prabhu Chesha Pralapa Suniya. You should just hear about them. Tarka na koriha. Don't try to argue about them. Don't try to examine them with logic. Just suna vishvasa koriya. Just hear it with full faith. So I want to repeat these things that I've heard from my Guru Maharaj, from my own purification. And Kaviraj Goswami, in the 19th chapter of Caitanya-caritamrta, he says something which is very important for our discussion today. While speaking about this Krishna prema, he says that the pramana, or the evidence of this, Ihara satyatve pramana Shri Bhagavate Shri Radhara prema pralap Bhramara-gita. He says that the evidence of this is found in the Bhagavatam in the 47th chapter, known as the Bhramara-gita, the song of the bumblebee. And he says that it's this Bhramara-gita which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was constantly meditating upon. And as we spoke in our last session, that Mahaprabhu especially liked to hear the songs of Vidyapati, the writings of Bilva-mangala Thakur, the Gita Govinda of Jayadev Goswami, the songs of Chandidas. And we spoke something about some of those songs and how those songs indicate the mood of Srimati Radharani. And this is why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to hear those particular songs, because he wants to understand the mood of Radharani. He's Krishna. But it's a very difficult thing for him to understand the mood of a devotee. He's God. And how can he understand, especially the mood of Radharani, which is such a confidential thing? So we were reading from Vidyapati's Bhangiya Padabali, a very amazing song, which I may go over a few times in our sessions now, because it has very much to do with this 14th chapter of the Antilila of Caitanya-caritamrta, and a section of it that I would like to suggest is one of the most confidential, mysterious, esoteric discussions in the Caitanya-caritamrta. So, Vidyapati, he describes the mood of Radharani. Katihun madana tanu dahasi hamari Hamanaha Shankaraha Ubaranari. Radharani, we spoke this in our last session, she's saying, what do you want to burn my body up for? You have no body. Lord Shiva, he was doing his meditation, and you came before him on behalf of the demigods, and you brought all these striptease dancers, whatever, these beautiful girls, and they started taking their clothes off and hubba hubba singing whatever they were singing, and you were trying to disturb Lord Shiva's mind, and he didn't even notice. And after some time, suddenly he said, what's going on? And his third eye opened, and he looked around, what are you bothering me for? And immediately he burned Cupid to ashes. So Radharani is saying, now you've already been burned to ashes, Cupid. What do you want to burn me for? What are you angry with me for? I'm not Lord Shiva. Hama Naha Shankar. Hahu Bharanari. I'm Bharanari. Varanari or Bharanari means that person who's living in the Varna or in the forest, which means a romantic girl. And Srimati Radharani goes on, Nahi jatta iha beni bibanga malati mala shiri naha ganga. Nahi jatta, these are not dreadlocks. Don't think I'm Lord Shiva. Beni, this is my braided hair. Bibanga. Naha Ganga, this is not the Ganga, but Malati Mala Shiri, this is a jasmine garland. Not a good translation. Malati, a particular type of wonderful flower. This is a Malati Mala on my hair. It's not the Ganga. Motima Badamoli Nahya Indu Bale Noya Nanaha Sindura Bindu. She says, it's not the moon on my head. I'm not Lord Shiva. Rather, this is a pearl ornament on my head. And no, this is not a third eye on my head. But this is my bindu, my sindur bindu. That all the ladies, they put a little bindu on their head. You should do that. Unless they're really in Maya. Kante gara lana mirgama dasar. Nahafani Raja Ujjlamani Hara. And she says that this is not poison around my neck. Rather, this is some musk on my throat. And this is not a snake around my neck. Rather, this is a necklace. Ujjlamani har, money means a nice pearl necklace. It's a pearl necklace around my neck. Nila patambara naha bhaga chala. Kailika kamala iha naha ikapal. And this is the word, particular word in this song that I wanted to bring out. Kapala. She says, Nila patambara. I'm wearing this blue silk sari, naha bhaga chal. I'm not wearing a tiger's skin. And Kailika Kamala. This is a Kailika Kamala. Kailika means a pastime, and Kamala means a lotus. This is a lotus, a pastime lotus. Nahai Kapal. It's not a skull. Why is this very sweet, innocent, pure-hearted girl singing about carrying a skull and wearing a tiger's skin? This is our question. Vidyapati kohe ehena suchanda ange basa masanaha malayaja panka. Vidyapati says ehena suchanda. This is someone who has such a wonderful form, a beautiful form. Ange bhasma nahi, these are not ashes on her limbs, but malayaja panka, the dust of the Malaya hills. So the use of this word kapala, I'd like to bring this out from the 14th chapter of the Anjalila of Caitanya-caritamrta, wherein Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, speaking to Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda, Kaviraj Goswami says that Ratri Hoile, night, he spoke his intimate feelings in a very, very private place to Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda. And Kaviraj Goswami, he gives a shloka. Prapta pranasta chuta vita atma yayo vishado jita deha geha grihita kapalika dharma kome brindavanam sindriya sishya brinda. He says that Krishna, lamenting the Srup Damodar and Roy Ramananda, he says that prapta pranastya chuta vita atma yayo, that personality who's vita atma, vita means a treasure, who's a vita atma, who's the treasure of my life, the treasure of my mind. Prapta pranasta achuta Krishna, prapta pranasta, I lost him, I got him and then I lost him. And because of that, I want to deha geha. I want to ujita deha geha. I want to give up my body and home. Due to this vishad. Vishadojita deha geha. I want to give up because of this vishad. Vishad means lamentation. I often speak about this word because Baladevi Vidyabhushan, he's given this title, Vishad Yoga, to the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And it means the yoga of lamentation, or the yoga means that by which you connect to God. So I'm connecting to the Lord through this lamentation. And indirectly Baladevi Vidyabhushan is indicating Srimati Radharani in the 47th chapter, the 10th canto, known as the Bhramara-gita, because she's connecting with Krishna in this way. And how is she connecting with Krishna? In the deepest way. So that Sri Radhaya Pranaya Mahima, that Radha and Krishna become one. That's the deepest connection. Through this visha, through this lamentation, this desire to give up the body and home, Mahaprabhu says that grihita means to accept, grihita kapalika dharma. I've accepted the religious principles, the dharma of a kapalika yogi, a kind of mendicant. And in this way, Brindavanam Sendriya Sishya Brinda. My mind went to Brindavan along with its disciples. Who are the Sishyas, or the disciples? The Sendriya, or the senses. My mind went to Brindavan, and my senses followed along with it. This is the madness of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Gambhira, in Caitanya-caritamrta, which indicates this Bhramara-gita in the 47th chapter, the 10th canto. And so then there's this very amazing song. Prabhupada gives a purport to this verse. Let me go over that purport. Prabhupada says a very simple purport. He says, one sentence, this verse is clearly metaphorical. And that's all that he says. And basically, Srila Prabhupada doesn't give an explanation of these verses. Very, very deep thing. So Kaviraj Goswami introduces this song of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by describing the situation there. Prapta Ratna Harana Tara Guna Sanariya Mahaprabhu Santape Vivala Roya Swaru Kanta Dhari Kahe Ha Ha Hari Hari Gaya Gela Hari Lachapala Hari He Prapta Ratna Harana. Having lost that Ratna, he gained it Prapta, and then Harana, he lost it. And the word Harana here is interesting. Harana, it's not commented here, but Hara has two meanings. One is to lose something. But another meaning, or to take something away, but another meaning is it's a name for Lord Shiva, who's also very significant in this. So, looking back at this song by Vidyapati, we're trying to understand the connection between the 47th chapter, the 10th canto, the Bhramara-gita, And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes in the Gambhira, those pastimes in the Gambhira, he's eating from the mental attitude, the mental statements spoken from, which were regurgitated from the mouths of Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda, who are Lalita and Vishaka. And this is a school book. This is the school. The Gambhira is the school where Sri Krishna is trying to understand the mood of Radha. He has the two best teachers, Lalita and Vishaka, and they have textbooks. Like in every school, you have textbooks. And what are the textbooks in this school? It's the Gita Govinda, the songs of Vidyapati, Chandidas, Bilva-mangala Thakur's writings. These are the textbooks. And so he's hearing these things, and he's acquiring union with Krishna. And then he becomes overwhelmed with separation. Mahaprabhu is santapa vivala. Vivala means to become overwhelmed. Santapi, it's this very, very intense lamentation. And at that time, Roy Saruper Kantadari, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu grabs a hold of the necks of Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda, and he begins to cry. Kahe ha ha hari hari. Where, alas, where is Krishna? And Kaviraj Goswami describes the situation of Mahaprabhu at that time, that Darya Gela Haila Chapala. He lost his patience and he became chapala. He became very, very restless. So this is the mood of Srimati Radharani in the 47th chapter of the 10th canto. Now Krishna is personally experiencing that exact mood when Uddhava came to the place now known as Uddhavakari, just near to Nandagaon, and this song, the Bhramara-gita, went on. And so then Kaviraj Goswami, he's written a song, which is a mirror of the emotions of Srimati Radharani. And if we want to understand this 47th chapter of the 10th canto and why some Vaishnavas say, Gaudiya Vaishnavas say, that this is the essence of the Bhagavatam, we have to turn to Caitanya-caritamrta. As Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, I'd already read Srimad Bhagavatam, but I couldn't understand it until I read Sri Caitanya-caritamrta. So in this 14th chapter, beginning with text 43, Kaviraj Goswami describes the song of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Shuna bandava Krishnera madhuri. Sunu bandava Krishnera madhuri. Sunu bandava Krishna madhuri. My dear friends, suno, listen to the sweetness of Krishna. Jada lobe moraman chari loka veda dharma yogi hana haila vikari. He says, my dear friends, because of a great desire that I had, this loba moraman, the greed of my mind, because of that chari loka veda dharma, I gave up all social and Vedic principles, and yogi hana haili bikari. I became a yogi sannyasi. So this is the statement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is Gaura Leela. He's taken sannyas. But this is also Krishna Leela. This is also Bhramara-gita, where Srimati Radharani Chadi Loka Veda Dharma. In the beginning of this 47th chapter, in the Uddhava Sandesh, Krishna tells Uddhava that the gopis, he uses the same words, Chadi Loka Veda Dharma. They gave up all different Loka Dharma for me. They became renunciates for me. And so Srimati Radharani now, she's become a bhikkhari, a Prema-bhikkhari. Bhikkhari means a beggar. She's become a Prema-bhikkhari, a beggar in the mood of love. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says that my mind has given up all these different things because now he's trying to understand the mood of Radharani. And therefore he has to leave Nabadweep. He has to leave Sachimata. He has to leave Vishnupriya because there's something more powerful calling him, which is the mood of Srimati Radharani. He has to experience the same kind of renunciation that Srimati Radharani experienced. But that renunciation of Radharani is not a conceptual renunciation. It's not a mental renunciation where she just decides, oh, I think I'm going to do this. Like sometimes some devotees say, I'm not really sure, maybe I should get married, or maybe I should take sannyas. If I take sannyas, everybody will give me the maha plate. And if I get married, my wife will definitely always be very sweet and cook for me and take care of me. Maybe which one should I do? Like we're going to a restaurant, we're going to pick out what do we want to eat. It's for our pleasure. Radharani's renunciation is not like that. And therefore, Lochan Das Thakur in Caitanya-mangala, when he speaks about the renunciation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says he calls it Adbhuta Vairagya, astonishing Vairagya. It's not a mental conception. It's something which is udgurna, which arises from the heart like a volcano. And this is the Bhramara-gita, the mad talks which arise from the heart of Srimati Radharani, in which she becomes like a mystic yogi. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes on in his song, the Sarup and Ramananda Ray. Krishna Lila Mandala Sudha Shanka Kundala Gadiyache Sukha Karikar Say Kundal Kani Pari Krishna Lahutali Dari Asa Juli Kandera Upar. Very interesting. There's one song which we want to go to in another session coming up by the poet Govinda Das, one of the greatest of the Gaudiya Pajavali poets, where he sings about the renunciation of Srimati Radharani and how she becomes a sannyasini. And she has a juli, a bag. Here it's said in this verse, Juli Kandara Upar. Juli, this bag is there, carrying on his shoulder. And he also has some bowl that he's carrying with him. A sannyasi has a komandalu. And this komandalu, he says, is Trishna Lau Tali. It's a tali, a bowl. It's made out of squash or a gourd. And it's the gourd or the bowl of my Trishna, my aspiration. Trishna also refers to water, drinking something. And he's saying that I'm going to this Krishna Lila Mandala, this Ras Lila of Krishna. This is Shanka Kundala. This is an earring made out of a conch shell. And it was manufactured by the great craftsman, Karikar, Shukadev Goswami. And I want to take that Ras Lila, that ring, and I want to put it on my ears. This is the nature of a sannyasi. There's one type of sannyasi, they put an earring on their ear. And Govinda Das sings about this. So what is that earring that Srimati Radharani wears as a sannyasini? That earring is the Ras Lila that she wears on her ear, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking about now. And he goes on to tell Roy and Sarup, Chinta Kanta Uri Gai Duli Vibhuti Malini Kai Ha Ha Krishna Pralapa Utai Udvegadva Dasa Hate Labhera Julani Mate Bhiksha Bhavekshina Kaliba. He says that the yogi of my mind is dressed. And what is the yogi of my mind dressed in? Chintakanta Urigai. It has this Urigai. Uri refers to a covering on the Gaya, on the body. And what is it? It's this kanta, this torn quilt, which is the quilt of renunciation of the 6 Goswamis. It's the quilt of renunciation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what is that quilt made out of? Chintakanta. It's a torn quilt, an old torn quilt of my anxiety. And Duli Vibhuti Malinikai. My body is covered with dust and with ashes. Why is it covered with dust? Because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the mood of Radharani, is rolling in the dust. Why is that body covered with ashes? It uses the phrase Malina Kai. Malina means a dirty body. And it's one of the 10 different dasa symptoms of Sudura Prabhas Viraha. There's 4 different types of separation. The most intense is Prabhas, or when Krishna goes away. There's 2 types of Prabhas. One is called Dura Prabhas, and that's when Krishna goes to Kamyavan or some forest of Vrindavan, and the gopis don't see him for a few hours. But Sudura Prabhas means when Krishna goes to Mathura and Dwarka, and the gopis don't know if they're ever going to see him again. And of that Sudura Prabhas, there's dasa. There's 10 different symptoms described in Ujjlamani by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and elaborated on in the purport by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in Caitanya-caritamrta. And one of those symptoms is Malina Kai, a dirty body, that the gopis, they no longer want to take bath anymore. And another description here is given, that Vibhuti, that they have ashes all over their body. This is the mood of Srimati Radharani in separation from Krishna, as we heard in the previous verse, that her mood is that I want to die. And that death means sannyas, because sannyas means to die socially. And Srimati Radharani, according to the songs of our acharyas, and we'll explore a little bit more of that to try to understand this 47th chapter of the 10th canto and the connection, the very esoteric connection with Gaura Lila. My Guru Maharaj used to say that the bhajan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a desire for death. Why is it the desire for death? Because he's doing the bhajan of Srimati Radharani. And that's the mood of Srimati Radharani described in Lalita Madhav. That's the mood of Srimati Radharani described in Ujjlamani and other literatures of our Goswamis. It's the mood of Radharani described in the 47th chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhramara-gita, as reflected in this 14th chapter of Ancha-lila of Caitanya-caritamrta. So in that feeling of wanting to die, Srimati Radharani is rolling in the dust. She's smearing ashes on her body in the mood of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva smears ashes all over his body in the mood of separation from Krishna. And what are those ashes that he smears on his body? The vibhuti, those ashes are the ashes from great devotees' bodies who've been burned. He wears bones around his neck, which are the bones of those great Vaishnavas. He has skulls around his neck, a necklace of skulls, which are the skulls of great Vaishnavas. This is the mood of Lord Shiva. The mood of renunciation, the mood of madness, the mood of desiring death. So Mahaprabhu is saying, ha ha Krishna palapa uttara, that my mind can only call out ha ha Krishna pralap. In this pralap, this kind of lamentation, this is the Bhramara-gita. Pralapa udvega. Udvega means great distress. And he says, udvega dwadasa hati labara julanamate. That he wears 12 bangles of distress on his wrist. And on his head, this yogi has a turban made out of greed. And because he hasn't eaten anything, bhiksha bhave, he's not begging for alms. Because of that kshina kalevara. So much deep purport in these verses. Bhiksha bhave means that he's not bhiksha abhave. He's not begging for any alms. This is the mood of the sannyasis in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They're not doing bhiksha. They're not going door to door to get something from people. But they have another different type of begging they're doing. They're begging for prema. They're begging for love. And therefore we see in the example of Madhavendra Puri, who established our line, the great sannyasi Madhavendra Puri, when he went to Govinda Kun in the bank of Govardhan Hill, he sat down there and he wouldn't beg alms. That was the practice of Madhavendra Puri. That's the practice of our sannyasis. And therefore Thakur Bhaktivinoda, he sings in one song, the words are not coming to my mind. He said that this is the only bhiksha that I'm begging from you. Radha Krishna Bol Bol Bolo Re Sobai. You just chant the names of Radha and Krishna. This is the mood of Srimati Radharani. This is the mood of the renunciates in this Gaudiya line. And therefore Bhiksha Bhave, he has this bhav, this mood that Bhava, he doesn't want Bhiksha. And therefore Kshina Kalevara, his body has become very, very thin and skinny. These are the ecstatic symptoms of Srimati Radharani. In this Dasa, these 10 different symptoms of Sudura Prabhas, this greatest type of separation when Krishna's left from Mathura and Dwarka, and the gopis don't know if they'll ever see him again. This is the height of Radharani's ecstasy, and there's 10 symptoms of that which we're going to hear about in this Bhramara-gita. And one of those symptoms is they stop eating, and their body becomes very, very thin. Malinikai, another symptom is their body becomes very dirty, they stop dressing. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. It's a very, very deep discussion. It's something I always wanted to speak about and try to explore. So we'll start again in our next session next week with this 46th verse of this 14th chapter. And right now, though, I'd like to turn to the devotees and see if anybody has any reflections. I have to apologize again for our internet connection, which sometimes goes on and off. Natalia, she has a reflection she's offering. Devotees have an obligation from the acharyas to speak about prema and try to understand it. Yes, because Rupa Goswami and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami really wanted to spread it. Yes, Raghunath Das Goswami says, Nadharmam Nadharmam Shuti Gananiruktam Kilakuru. He says, don't pay attention to Dharma. Give up Dharma. Krishna in the Gita says, Sarva Dharmam Parityagya. Give up Dharma. And just surrender. And that verse in the Bhagavad Gita is the beginning of Gaura Lila. Because Gaura Lila means a practical example of surrender. Whereas Krishna Lila, my Guru Maharaj said, means a theoretical proposition of surrender. But it's practically experienced in the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's practically experienced by Srimati Radharani. But no one knows about her until Krishna comes in the mood of Srimati Radharani, as Gauranga Mahaprabhu. So this is our sampradaya. This is the dana, the wealth of our sampradaya. And if we don't understand it, if we're simply trying to cultivate mundane dharma, and we're trying to cultivate mukti, liberation, you're not really a Gaudiya Vaishnava. We have an obligation to read Nectar of Devotion to Srila Prabhupada. We have an obligation to read Sri Caitanya-caritamrta, and we have an obligation to contemplate upon the meanings of those important books. So I want to welcome Roma and Manju Krishna Prabhu, my humble pranams. If anybody else has any reflections or comments or anything, you can go ahead and post those. Again, my apologies for going back and forth with the internet connections. It's been difficult for us today. Anybody here in the room has any reflection, you can say something. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and stop. Anapani, you have some thoughts? Careful distance.
You're just over here. I just want
to talk about.
Thank you so much for the class. I just was thinking about the point you mentioned, how the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is called Yoga of Lamentation. So, and you said that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur indirectly indicates lamentation as a connection. He directly pointed the lamentation gives you connection with God, and he indicates Radharani is there. So by speaking about it indirectly. So, and I was thinking about the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. It's really difficult to see Radharani is there, definitely. But I just was thinking of acharyas, how they anyway see Radharani and Krishna and Mahaprabhu there. So this is the topmost emotion of Radharani in the form of Mahaprabhu. So, and I was thinking, so when you say indirectly indicate, you mean that they anyway see that, and that's why they indicate, but there is no purpose to speak about that in Bhagavad Gita.
So someone may protest, what are you trying to make all these esoteric connections between? I mean, it's the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Dhritarashtra Vacha, Dharma Chaitanya KURUKSHETRA, Samaveda Yutsavaha. They're in the place of pilgrimage. It's just, what are you trying to go to the 10th canto and Caitanya-caritamrta and all these things? Well, because we have to. Because our acharyas describe that this Bhagavad Gita was so very dear to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami also gives us a hint. When Mahaprabhu is doing his Gambhira Leela, he's not only staying in the Gambhira, but he's also moving about. Sometimes he's going to Jagannath Vallabha Gardens and seeing Krishna in the forest there. Sometimes he's going to the bank of the Jamuna. Sometimes he's going to Tota Gopinath Temple and hearing from Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. And Kaviraj Goswami says that what part of the Bhagavatam is he hearing? He's hearing the 4th canto and the 7th canto, the Dhruva Charit, pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj, and the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. So don't complain to me that we're saying that the first chapter of the Gita indicates Gaura Leela, and he's saying that's a difficult connection. How do you make the connection between the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam and Gaura Leela? Or the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam and Gaura Leela? I mean, why doesn't he just go right to the 10th canto? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explains there's two purposes of Mahaprabhu in focusing on the 4th canto and the 7th canto. One is for Lokik Siksha, Loka Siksha, to preach to common people that Adavante Chamadye Chahari Sarvatagiyate, from the beginning, middle, and the end, wherever you touch it, the Bhagavatam is all about Krishna. It's all nectar. And we shouldn't just jump ahead to the 10th canto. That, however, is a Bahiranga Karan, or an external reason for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's relishment of that 4th canto and the 7th canto. But the Antaranga Karan, the internal reason, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says, is that he's in the mood of Radharani, and Radharani relates to it, because Dhruva goes through all kinds of difficulties to get the Lord. And Prahlad Maharaj really goes through a lot of difficulties. His own father is trying to kill him in so many different ways. For him to attain the Lord, it was a very difficult thing. And Radharani really relates to that, yes. So Radharani, she relates to those particular sections in the Bhagavatam. And the Gaudiya Vaishnavas can see those sections of the Bhagavatam, and they can see the mood of Radharani reflected in them. So similarly, in that first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we can see something also, that mood of Radharani, because that's this yoga of lamentation, Vishad Yoga. And this yoga of lamentation is perfectly manifested in the 47th chapter of the 10th canto, the Bhramara-gita. It's fully manifested. How is it fully manifested? Okay, Radharani's feeling separation, and she's seeing Krishna as a bumblebee, but it's fully manifested only in Gaura Leela, when, because of that 47th chapter, Radha and Krishna become one, which is complete union. It's a very, very esoteric topic. And Manju Krishna Bhavi comments, he says, really, it's a very, very mysterious and deep topic. So let's see if anybody else has any other reflections. They can paste them in also in our Pari Prashna group. Somebody was posting something there and they got nervous and they deleted it. Okay. So, okay, anything else from anybody? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and stop.
I think it's her comment.
Oh, she wrote up here. Okay, thank you. I've got it. She says that a type of sannyasi who wears an earring, that earring is the Ras Leela. This is Krishna Kun's meditation. We know that all Indian ladies traditionally wear a ring in their ears not other shapes. How beautiful to know how the culture preserves their or our topmost aspiration to enter that Ras Leela. What an udipana to look at your wife and see Krishna's Ras Leela. That's a very cool thought. Thank you, Aunt Krishna Kun. And she goes on that it's not a mental renunciation, but a bhuta vairagya. It arises from the heart like a volcano. We know that Vasudevi Bhagavati, that knowledge and renunciation is a byproduct of bhakti. We need to become so greedy for that. So how does that greed come? I'm wondering about why the turban of greed, by putting our heads in the dust of the devotees' lotus feet. So Kaviraj Goswami indeed mentions, she's asking, how does that greed come? And what is the turban of greed? Kaviraj Goswami doesn't explain it, and Prabhupada said this is a very mysterious thing. This is an allegory is given here, so we can try to understand something about it. In the previous verse, it's described that on his body is this dhuli, this dust, and in other various places, both in Gaura Lila and in Krishna Lila, it's described that Krishna wants the dust of the devotees, and he takes that dust and he puts it on his head, which is mentioned here. So perhaps that julani, or that turban, is the dust from the devotees' feet. It's lobher julani, it's the turban of greed. And why? What is the significance of saying it's a turban of greed? Because that turban is what we wear. That's what we're advertising. And here, this is what the gopis, advertising in this sense means, is what the gopis are appealing to Krishna with. They're calling out to Krishna in this way. They have this very, very intense distress, udvega, dvodasa hoite lobera julanamate. And this is their bhiksha bhavi, this is their bhiksha, this is the alms that they're wanting. They have this greed, but it's not ordinary alms, ordinary things they're begging for, but they have this lobera julani, this greed to get this Krishna prema. I want this thing, I want Krishna. And what is Radharani's mood in wanting Krishna? It's not just so that I can hang out with him, or so that I can look at him and he looks beautiful and it satisfies my senses. But her desire is to serve Krishna. And therefore she wants to see him in person. So this is the greed of the devotees, and we wear that turban of greed. That turban indicates two things. It indicates your position. You don't see this so much today here, but if you go to Braj, if you go to Rajasthan, you'll see there's many different types of turbans, and according to how they tie the turban, the shape of the turban, according to the color of the turban, the type of cloth they use in the turban, you can understand their caste, you can see their village, you can see where they're coming from, or maybe they're a king has a particular silk type of turban with something in it. So the turban also indicates where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a particular greed of the devotees. It indicates I'm advertising that thing, and it indicates the line that I come in. This is the meanings that I see in this phrase, the turban of greed. So we'll go ahead and stop there now. I want to thank everybody for taking part in this. This is such an amazing subject matter, and I want to continue on with this. We're going to go very slow. I hope it doesn't drive anybody crazy. We're going to take one step forward and 2 steps backward, and then 3 steps forward and 2 steps backward. We're going to keep going back and forth so that we can try to digest this in a proper way. I want to meditate on the meaning of things because this is a topic that my Guru Maharaj spoke about extensively, and I want to chew on this thing very deeply and try to digest it. So thank you all very much for walking with me on this topic, on this journey of our Katha. And one last comment here is from Brinda Sundari in the very distant place of Denver, Colorado. Her reflection is that Radharani's renunciation is very sobering to hear about, very fixed and deep. Hearing about their transcendental emotions is very sobering. Yes. And again, we may say that this is not legal. This is illegal. Nobody should listen to these classes. And you shouldn't speak about this thing. We should only talk about how we're not our body and these things. But if you talk about you're not our body, if you go down that line, what is the ultimate end you come to? You come to the mood of Srimati Radharani also, because she's having this desire to leave her body. And that's the deepest understanding. So we should hear about their emotions, but our hearing about these emotions is not for our selfishness or for our personal pleasure, but this is our bhajan. This is our service to those great devotees like Srila Prabhupada, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, our Guru Janas. It's our obligation to them. This is the kirtan of our sampradaya, which has been handed down to us. And we have to after hearing about it, we have an obligation to repeat it. And we repeat it for the pleasure of our acharyas who want help to do their kirtan. And what is their kirtan? They're assisting the kirtan of Rupa Raghunath, who are assisting the kirtan of Swarup Damodar and Roy Ramananda in the Gambhira, who are doing this kirtan for the pleasure of Krishna, who's trying to understand the mood of Srimati Radharani. This is the kirtan of our sampradaya. So thank you all very much. This is a mad subject matter. Brinda Sundari comments further, yes, hearing about her emotions helps us understand the pure form of emotions, helps us realize what purity is. Even in our bumbling, beast-like way, Indradumna Maharaj wrote me something yesterday and was saying some flattering words to me, something. And I said, Maharaj, I'm just a beast coming from a beastly background, but my Guru Maharaj has engaged me in a circus, and he's having this beast singing. It's a singing beast. And the singing beast is reciting some verses and things. And it's a very astonishing thing in the circus. If you go and there's a dog or a bear or something which is singing, everybody wants to pay money to go and see that. That's our move. So we're going to go ahead and stop there. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samabhaita Bhakta Binda ki jai, Go Prema